What's up, my friends? Welcome back to another video, and today we are taking a look at Big Fish Audio's newest release called Vintage Big Band. So I was recently made aware of this release on Facebook. I forgot the name of the gentleman who was talking about it, but I was instantly intrigued. If you know me, I really love, big band libraries, even though they're really the hardest kind of genre to really capture convincingly. There are so many developers now really trying to make a mark and a stamp in that marketplace and in this area. So I'm always very interested in seeing what new comes up. And when I knew that Big Fish Audio had a new offering, I was definitely intrigued. And admittedly, I haven't used too much Big Fish Audio stuff in the past just because I was always under the impression that a lot of their samples and their products were loop based, which I don't use too much in my work. But taking a look at the demos, taking a look at the walkthrough video, I was definitely intrigued because it seems like it's multi-sampled. And so I reached out to the company and they were kind enough to send me a copy to review for you guys. So we're going to do kind of like a first look at this library, and hopefully it'll give you a sense of what the library is all about, what you can kind of expect when you get into it, and the sound, of course, as well. Before we do that, though, in case you're looking for a sample library kind of buyer's guide, I want to give that to you absolutely free. I actually put this together a few years ago, going over my personal preferences when it comes to orchestral sample libraries, including like, strings, winds, brass, and percussion. But I've also created sections for like piano libraries and jazz libraries like this one, and ethnic libraries. So a bunch of different categories. I've also included the prices there. So in case you're on the market for some new libraries and you kind of want a categorized, digestible guide to go along with it, I want to give that to you totally free. So if you click the first link in the box below, it'll take you there. It'll give you all my suggestions, and hopefully that helps you on your next purchase. So without further ado, let's kind of take a look at this library. So here we are on their website, Vintage Big Band, and the sale price or intro price is $249.95 or $250, and the regular price is $300 or $299. It basically advertises itself as an all-in-one library. So they kind of talk about the influences they were going for here. And this library captures the sound of jazz greats like Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Frank Sinatra, Buddy Rich, Stan Kenton, and Mel Lewis. Like, these are bold claims. If they say that they're capturing the sound and really a whole big band in a box, and they're citing these names, then you know that they're taking this seriously. So in terms of the stuff that's included, we have 33 brass and woodwind instruments, 9 keyboards and vibes instruments, 4 bass and guitar instruments, 7 drum and percussion, 12 multi-patches, and so there's also arranger patches as well, which basically create pre-orchestrated chords and voicings for you, which I think are super cool in case you're not as, let's say, fluid in the jazz idiom. And then they kind of more comprehensively list up all the patches here, which is really nice. So when I was getting my hands on this, and let me just adjust the color scheme here. Okay, when I was getting into playing with this library, I downloaded it very recently, I think like a couple days ago, and I was playing around. So for a couple things I noticed. So I'm going to share this with you before I start playing the patches, just so I can get these disclaimers out of the way. First of all, the dynamic layers are not mapped to the mod wheel. Okay, so if I move this mod wheel, you see here on the contact instance, right? Not only is the mod wheel moving, but it's actually also moving the contact patch volume. And this is something I've never experienced before. Well, I shouldn't say never, but very rarely experienced. So if I play a certain note, that note itself is going to change in volume, but it's the actual contact patch doing the adjustments in the volume there, rather than the actual sample itself within the instrument. So this was definitely new for me. The other thing is that these instruments were basically all mapped in terms of dynamic layers to velocity. So if you play, for example, a really quiet note, you get that, right? But if I play now harder, you definitely get a lot harder. And this is in contrary to some other libraries that I'm used to, where the dynamics are basically controlled by the mod wheel, and the dynamic layers are basically, triggered by the mod wheel. But when you're playing your style, when you're playing your lines, you can basically focus on the legato and the expression and keeping it as natural as possible. But in this case, if all the dynamics are mapped to velocity, then basically you're forced to be very careful with your playing, so that if you accidentally play too hard, the note's going to jump out at you and be surprising, right? So that's another thing that you kind of have to just adjust to, or get used to. The other thing, though, I think the biggest thing about this library is that there is no true legato or even scripted legato. And, that's not the greatest thing when you're trying to write melodies, right? Because when you're trying to write melodies, you want those consistent transitions between the different notes to give you a believable performance. But this library is about, like, I think it's 12 gigabytes, which is very small for a library of this size. And considering what it comes with, it's a very, very manageable size. And that's to be applauded, absolutely. But of course, that comes at the expense of the legato samples and scripting. So as a result, you might actually use this library more for pad work or use it for occasional layering purposes where you don't need exposed legato lines, for example. This is especially the case with all the horns. So let me just go down here. So we take a look here, Vintage Big Band. You see it's kind of categorized in 5 different folders. And so the brass and the woodwinds have so many, as you can see, lots of different variations. I've just chosen a few of these we're going to play through. You can get a sense of how they sound and how they work. And then we're going to keep going through and give you some impressions. So let's kind of get started. With the alto sax 1, I'm going to try to leave the mod wheel again at the middle because, again, that's going to result in the patch volume being in the middle. And then I'm going to try to play with my right hand as smoothly as possible. Try not to let any notes stick out, but just know that if you're doing this, you are going to have to adjust the velocities here and there after your performance. So let's kind of go through this. Yeah, so that's basically the first alto sax. And you can see, again, for melodic purposes, it's very difficult to create a really very smooth, convincing legato line, but that's mainly because there's no legato samples here, right? So again, you're trying to keep the velocities as consistent as possible. Let's move on to the second ballad patch, and this we would expect a softer, more creamy tone, which we absolutely get. I really enjoyed the actual sound of this. I think they really nailed the actual tone, but let's see if I'm able to get somewhat convincing melodic line from this. Okay, one thing I want to mention before we move on is that, this is naturally polyphonic because, again, there's no legato here. But one thing I find interesting is that the actual attack of the notes seems quite immediate. So if you try to play a passage with some shorter notes or almost like a marcato articulation, you can actually get a somewhat convincing phrase there. So in terms of the articulations, most of them come with a sustain. They also come with staccato, so shorter, of course. Stab, which is basically a stab, like they play the note, but then they kind of fall off really quickly. The fall off is a longer fall, right? And then the doit goes up. And then in the trumpets, they have the shake as well. And in the flutes, they have the trills. But basically, I'm just saying that the samples themselves have kind of a nice attack even when it comes to the sustain. So if you want to go like da 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 da, you can certainly do that too. Even though you might want to switch out those shorter notes with the actual staccato articulation, you can get a pretty nice result out of the box just by using the sustain patch. Okay, let's go on to the bass sax. So I actually find this clarinet a lot more convincing, actually, compared to some of the saxes, just due to the way the performance is. It's kind of smoky, it's kind of hot. I really like the general vibe that this clarinet is giving me. I find it a lot easier to kind of join those notes together polyphonically and almost kind of simulate a legato line there. But yeah, just you can tell that they've really captured and nailed the actual sound of those different eras they're advertising. So I'm really liking the sound itself so far. Really, really nice. Okay, let's hear the flugel next. All right, so basically that's all the saxes, and there's some flugelhorns, there's the clarinet there, which we kind of already talked about. But basically, yeah, if I was to make any recommendations, if I was like basically working on this library, what I might do are two main things. So I would remap the dynamic layers themselves to the mod wheel, even if it's like a scripted dynamic thing, even if they only recorded like, let's say, one or two dynamic layers or velocities, that's totally fine. But just let me do that with the mod wheel. And then the second thing I would do is let the keyboard range, like let the actual playing not be velocity sensitive. So again, I want to control the dynamics with the mod wheel. I just want to focus on my performances. I don't really want to care how hard I'm pressing the keys. I just want to be able to play a line and have it sound convincing. The other thing I would do is add a scripted legato, even if it's like, yeah, even if it's scripted, it doesn't have to be true legato, but as long as it sounds good, that's the most important thing. So yeah, I'm assuming that's not too difficult to program. Hopefully in some sort of update, it might be possible, but even a scripted legato would be really, really nice. So we could focus on creating those melodies and not have to do too much external tweaking after the performance itself. So just a little note there, but in terms of the actual sound and the tone of the instruments, I'm really enjoying it so far. And it really is sounding, kind of like those Count Basie records that I've listened to. Let's go into the trombone here. So let's see what this sounds like. Mario just jumped there. I apologize for that. I promise I didn't do that. Okay, let's go to the trumpets. So, by the way, I really love the actual trombone sound. Like, it actually sounds like a real trombone. So, again, I really love the sound. Trumpet one, let's go. So the trumpet one definitely has that more brassy, like fortissimo quality to it. So it can really serve that lead trumpet texture really well if you just need those sustains. Let's hear the ballad trumpet here. If that's not gritty, I don't know what is. I forgot to show you some of those articulations in the trumpet as well, so let's go through these. So yeah, I mean, I mean, the individual articulations sound so good on their own, but it's just that lack of legato that just bothers me a little bit. Yeah, again, even if it's a scripted legato, that would open the possibilities of melodic playing so much, and you just wouldn't have to, go back and tweak the individual velocities and make sure the note lengths were all matched up properly. But anyway, that's my only gripe really with this. And again, the velocity mapping there, but yeah, in terms of the sound and the actual playability, I really enjoy it so far. Let's kind of move on to the keyboards, the vibes, and the bass and guitar as well. All right, let's take a look at the next section. So now we have the keyboards and the vibes, and there's a couple patches here. Let's just play through them. You can see they're all quite light on the CPU, which is awesome. They're not that deeply sampled, but they're basically meant as the accompanying instruments to the main horns and the other instruments. So let's have a listen to some of these. right, so those are the keyboards, the vibes, and the bass and guitars. Essentially these are the rhythm sections, right? So they definitely give you a nice range of instruments here, a good variety, and I personally think they are perfectly serviceable. They definitely do their job, and the actual sound quality is very nice as well, and they definitely have that kind of retro sound to it as well. So yeah, very nice. Let's kind of move on to the percussion section, and then we'll take a look at the arranger tools last, which are some of my favorite things in this library. So jazz and percussion, we have the regular big band kit brushes. We also have the variation on the sticks. Then we have the cocktail drum kit brushes and the sticks, Latin percussion kit, soul jazz drum kit, and a lo-fi version of that kit as well. Let's start with the regular big band drum kit brushes. Yeah, so that lo-fi kit definitely has some processing applied to it to give it that slightly wider but more muffled sound compared to the regular drum kit. So yeah, super cool. You got a variety of drum kits there as well. And each one, again, is very light, so RAM will never be an issue with this library, luckily. Again, because there's no legato transitions, there's no scripting that's super complicated, so you're going to have a pretty easy time using this library. Finally, let's get into the arranger tools. Okay, so these arranger tools are probably the coolest things I found in this library. If you're like a true jazz arranger, you do this all the time, you probably won't need these at all. But again, these give you a really nice pre-orchestrated, like whether they're loops or voiced out chords, they're really convenient. And so these are some of the jazz drum loops, and they are mapped to your BPM tempo. So whatever is in your host, whatever that tempo is, this will automatically sync up to that. All right, let's move on to the jazz guitar chords. Now, here you see some different categories, right? So I believe the red key switches on the bottom are the different chord types. So you have things ranging from, diminished, augmented, whatever they are, to the full dominant chords, different alterations here, which is really nice. And then here, the blue key switch range, I'm gonna turn the volume down actually. Blue is basically just regular sustained chords. Green is shorter, like think of them as staccatos. And then the purple are basically the attack of the note, but then a fall off at the end. So if I just play through some of these. Isn't that so cool, right? So you just choose your chord type and you can key switch between them so easily, and then you can just create these beautiful chord progressions that have just really nice voicings to them. Exact same idea with the piano chords. We'll get to those in a second, but let's get to some of these jazz percussion loops first. Very cool. Definitely has that kind of Latin feel. Let's hear these percussion loops here, over here. All right, let's hear these piano chords. So beautiful. All right, then we have the soul jazz drum loops. Here we go. All right, that's basically the whole library. So hopefully this kind of gave you a sense of the different patches and what it kind of comes with, how it basically functions. But let's kind of round this up with a quick summary of my personal pros and personal cons with this library. So let's start with the good news, the stuff that I really enjoy. First of all, I think they really nailed the sound. I think the sound of this era like the 30s to 70s with all the different big bands in there, different groups and everything like that. They really just got the vibe of the instruments down, and that's why I could definitely see myself getting really inspired by some of these instruments. I think it could be just really, really useful for certain arrangements, definitely. Another thing is just the ease of use. So you see here, you don't really have very many knobs to control. Generally, it's just reverb, tape saturation, and then the bass and treble, some EQ stuff. And then this middle thing here, this logo doesn't really do anything. But then over here, you can select the type of room you want to put it in. So some more reverb stuff there. And then over here, you get to choose the different key switches, different chord types for some of the patches, and you can, assign them down here. So in terms of ease of use, that's also really, really cool. Another thing is just the overall variety. So you definitely really get a big band in a box. In terms of the types of instruments and everything that's included, there's no lacking here. So I really think that they went through and went through the pains of sampling so many of these different instruments, albeit not the most in-depth you could go in terms of sampling. They could have recorded tons and tons of dynamic layers and all that, but then it would have just bloated the size of the library. And I think what they give you here are the bare essentials in terms of dynamic layers. So those are my favorite things about the library, absolutely. In terms of the things I think could be improved, I think, again, the general mapping is my biggest thing. So having the actual dynamic layers mapped to the mod wheel, and then having an actual scripted legato just to preserve the size of the library, not bloat it too much. But even having a scripted legato, especially for the melodic intentional instruments like the ballad saxes, the ballad trumpets, trombones, and then even the ones with the mutes, that would be so nice having a scripted legato there. These two little tweaks, I think, could really just take this library to another level, because then it would make melodic playing so much easier and so much more convincing. As long as a scripted legato sounds decent and it's fluid and it sounds great, who cares if it's real or not, right? As long as it serves the purpose that it's intended for. But yeah, that's basically my personal recommendation there. So if you are interested in this type of thing, you know, you're doing mock-ups, you want to create that sort of vibe, then I would definitely recommend this library, but just know that there is no included true or scripted legato. And so that's going to be something you have to work around. And I do not think there's a way you can remap, you know, the velocity to the mod wheel instead. So I think that's just something you just have to get used to in terms of the workflow. But again, if this is the sound you're going for, if that's the vibe you want, then I don't think there is another option on the market that really sounds like this. And because again, they really baked that sound into the samples, it really does sound quite nice and I really enjoy it. And the fact that, you know, they also have the tape saturation there allows you to put more of that vibe to it. That's a really interesting feature there too. So yeah, if you're interested in the library, you can check the link below. I put it in the description box, and just a little disclaimer, it is an affiliate link. So if you do purchase the library using that link, I will receive a very small commission as a thank you for checking out the link. No extra cost to you, but if you want to support my channel in any way, then that's a perfect way to do it. If you found this review helpful, I would really appreciate that. But again, no hard feelings if you don't do that. I hope you found this review kind of helpful, kind of this first look, and I can definitely see myself using this for certain situations. I think a really cool combination maybe would be using this library as kind of the backbone of the orchestra, right, of the big band, but then using these more melodic instruments as the lead instruments. So for example, Mojo 2, right? They have some really beautiful legato instruments, but they don't really have that many sections, if at all. So you could definitely use those as the lead players, or you know, the tenor colossus instruments or the Austin saxes, like musical sampling stuff. They've really done a lot of work in the legato department, whereas they've done less work in the actual ensemble and fleshing out the rest of the band. So you could definitely use this in combination with the other libraries and you could get a pretty convincing result there. Just a little suggestion, but yeah, it's really nice to see this out on the market. It definitely has its place, but again, just make sure you know what you're getting into. Listen to the walkthroughs, go through the demos on the website, and just make an informed decision for yourself. So thank you so much for watching. Again, if you don't have my sample library buyer's guide, I actually have included this library inside the guide. If you want some jazz library recommendations, this one is part of there now. But I also cover like strings, winds, brass, percussion, all the orchestral sections with the prices as well, piano libraries, ethnic libraries there too. So it's all condensed into one guide. It's totally free. Just check the link below. It'll take you straight there. And it's my gift to you for checking out this video today. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'll catch you in the next one and take care. Bye-bye.